The Sierra Nevada mountains, our home away from home. We probably spend a majority of our summer exploring these beautiful landscapes, stepping over granite and hiking our way through its pine forest. Undoubtedly, there is no other place in the world like it, and each year we're beckoned back, time and time again. So this is an ode to the Sierra, with its crystal clear alpine lakes so cold they'll steal the air right from your lungs. The sound of wood crackling against a backdrop of stellar jays singing into the night. The sight of bats dancing below the tree line, and the backdrop of tree-covered mountains that reach high above the sky. The sound of our snoring pup who loves cuddling up to our sleeping bags. The glorious dance to piece together, pole by pole, our home for the night as the sun sets behind the mountains to the west. The peace of lying in a hammock as the forest comes alive for dinner time. Attempting a crossword puzzle way too difficult for our own brain. Spending our days hunting flowers and lounging by the lake. These are the mountains that we know best, and we still have so much to see. We intend to explore as much as we can this summer, just like every summer before. So here's to the Sierra Mountains. We can't wait to be back. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching that video. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'm really proud and happy with how it turned out, especially seeing as that was the first time that I've completely edited an entire video within Davinci Resolve. And although it took a little bit longer than it normally did, I found that it was really easy to figure out, especially once I mapped my keyboard shortcuts to match what I used in Premiere. So now what I would like to do is just quickly jump into Davinci and show you kind of how I color graded my clips for this video. One thing that particularly stood out to me that I was really happy with was the colors, and so I figured since I've kind of updated my workflow for color grading SLOG-2 footage, I would jump into Davinci and kind of show you how I go about color grading that footage. So without further ado, let's jump into Davinci and I'll show you how I did it. So as you can see here, this is the Davinci Resolve color panel, and this is just one of the clips from the video. I'm not going to go through every clip because once I show you the process that I did for this one in particular, it's exactly what I did for every single other clip, not including small adjustments to exposure and saturation and that sort of thing. Obviously what I would do is start with kind of a base grade, and then for each clip go ahead and make small adjustments to exposure, saturation, certain colors, and vignetting. So as you can see here, my node tree consists of 9 nodes. Some of them didn't even get used, but I usually start with this, and if I need to add some or take some out, I'll do that if needed. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do is start from scratch. So what I'll do is I'll delete all of these nodes, and I'm gonna go ahead and reset this node at the beginning here, and we can just get rid of that. So this is essentially what you would start with if you were color grading in Resolve. You just start with one node. So what I'll start by doing is creating a couple of new nodes by hitting Alt-S. And I'm gonna go ahead and create 6 nodes, and then on the 6th one, I'm gonna hit Alt-O. That creates a new outside node, which will help with the vignette, and I'll show you that later on. And then I'll go ahead and create 2 final nodes by hitting Alt-S twice again. So now I have a total of 9 nodes. And just for organization's sake, I'm gonna go ahead and label these. So the first one will be my exposure. Node 2 will be our saturation, and this is also where I do white balance adjustments. I'm going to skip node 3, 4, and 5 as I'll label those as needed once we get further along. Node 6 I'm going to go ahead and label as my vignette. And node 7 will be our outside vignette. Node 8 I will label as our Rec. 709 conversion. And on the final, node 9 is going to be our LUT. So now that these are all labeled, I want to go ahead and start by selecting node 8, and we're going to start by converting our SLOG-2 footage to Rec. 709 so we have a good place to start. I'll hit Open Effects at the top right. Color Space Transform is the effect we're looking for, so I'll drag that onto node 8. And here you can see all of the information that we're going to need to input so we can convert SLOG-2 into Rec. 709. So we'll start by our input color space. We can go down to the bottom and find a Sony S gamut. Our input gamma is going to be Sony SLOG-2, and you can already see that's making a great adjustment to our image. Our output color space we're going to set to Rec. 709, and our output gamma will also be set to Rec. 709. So I'm going to open tone mapping, that's usually open, and then the method that I do for tone mapping is either Davinci or Simple, and so I'm going to make sure that's selected, and then we can close our Open Effects tab. So here we have a pretty good place to start, and the first thing that I'll normally do is go ahead and jump to my exposure, and I add my contrast, and I mess with my lift gamma gain. So we're going to go ahead and pump the contrast up, and as you can see my waveform at the bottom right, I essentially want to get it to a point where I'm not crushing my blacks, but they're in a good spot. And yeah, that looks pretty good. And then what I like to do is bring my gain down, and I like to bring my gain down under the 900 IRE mark. That's just kind of where I've been exposing my highlights lately, and I really like the way it looks. I'm gonna bring the lift up just a tiny bit, and then I can mess with my midtones or my gamma. And what I'll do now is jump to node 2, which is my saturation, and I'm gonna bring this up, and let's bring it up to 65. That's a good place to start. What I'll also do while we're here is adjust my color temperature because it's a little bit on the warmer side. So let's bring it to -200, and that looks pretty good to me. So the next step for me is to apply my final look, or main grade is what I call it. So node 9 is where I will do that, and what I'll do is I'll right click and I'll go to LUT. What I tend to use is a couple of LUTs by Triune Films or Film Riot, and they have a retro 80s LUT pack, which is essentially a bunch of LUTs that are based off of 80s movies, and you can see them all here. And one that I've really liked lately is the Big Trouble in Little China LUT. It actually doesn't make it look necessarily like the movie, but what I do notice is that it kind of gives it like a Kodak film look, and I really like what it does to the greens and the blues as well as the skin tones. As you can see, it's pretty heavy-handed here, so we're going to need to dial the intensity down. We'll jump to this little icon right here, which is our node key, and our key output, our gain, is set to 1, which is equivalent to about 100%, and as you can see, as I bring it down to the left to 0, then it totally brings us back to our Rec 709 image. So what I'll do is I'll kind of slide it up until I find a good middle ground, so right about there at 0.55, let's say, is a good spot. So now that that's set, I'm going to jump back into exposure, and I'm going to go ahead and adjust my gain so it's under that 896 IRE mark, and I'm going to go ahead and bring the gamma down just a tiny bit, and I'll lift up just a little. Great, so this image is looking really awesome right off the bat, and essentially this is what I did to all of the clips in the timeline. I would just go ahead and mess with exposure, saturation, and white balance for each clip, as well as apply a vignette. So for this clip in particular, one other adjustment that I'd like to make on node 3, and we'll label it as Blue Luma, is bring the luminance level of the blue down a little bit so it kind of creates a little bit of contrast with the clouds. So now that I have node 3 selected, I'll jump into my curves, and we're gonna go ahead and find Hue versus Luma. I'm gonna select blue, and as you can see, I'm just gonna bring this down a little bit. And if you notice the sky and the water, the luminance value starts to dip, and what it does is it almost creates like an effect like as if you had a polarizer filter on it. And I really like the way that contrast looks right about there. So now that that's set, I'm gonna jump into node 6, which is my vignette. I'm gonna hit this icon right here, which is our window. We're gonna create a new power window as a circle, and I'm gonna zoom out. And I'm gonna go ahead and make this window or mask around my subject. And I'm gonna grab these red dots and bring it out, which is a feathering option. And that looks pretty good to me, right there. And so the way this works is because I created 6 as an outside node to 7. Essentially, this is going to, any adjustments I make here are gonna affect outside of that power window, and node 6, anything I do will affect inside the power window. So as you can see, if I go to curves and I bring this up, it's only affecting what's inside that power window. So I'm gonna right click on that just to set it back. And I'm not actually gonna make any adjustments to inside the window, it's outside the window that I wanna make adjustments to. So I'll jump to node 7, and I'm gonna go ahead and bring this curve down. And as you can see, it kind of creates a light vignette. So the trick here is making this look natural and not obviously like there's a window, right? So let's go ahead and just bring it slightly down, and that looks good to me. So the last thing I'll do is I'll jump to node 6. I'm gonna go to my tracker option, and I'm gonna go ahead and bring this to the very beginning of the clip, and I'm gonna bring it right up to my subject, and I'm gonna hit play. And what Davinci is really awesome at is it's gonna go ahead and go through the entire clip, and it's gonna track where my subject is. So now that vignette is going to follow my subject throughout the entire clip, which is really awesome, and Davinci is really fast, opposed to some other software that we all know. So one last adjustment I'm gonna make is go ahead and go to my outside vignette. I think that the window that I created is just way too strong. As you can see, it looks really unnatural. So I'm gonna just go ahead and do it again, but bring it down just a little bit this time. It really doesn't need to be much. A great colorist once told me that if you can notice a power window, then you're doing it wrong, which I completely agree with. So there you have it. That's how I color graded that entire video in Davinci Resolve. If you have any questions about my workflow or how I shot some of the footage or my color grading process, feel free to drop it in the comments below and I'll make sure to get back to you. And with that, I will see you on the next one. Peace.